Hey, how are you?
Hey Sam, I'm good. How are you doing?
Not too bad. It's been a minute because we invited so many awesome folks, and I want to just keep chatting with each one of you. But we're trying to stick to our timelines. So, Shaun, tell us who you are, where are you from, what are you up to these days?
So obviously my name is Shaun. Shaun Lawrence. I'm working WPF land at the moment, which possibly
Interesting.
shouldn't admit. Um, I'm a developer by trade. I've in more recent years been lucky enough to be graced with a Microsoft MVP for some of the work that I do. And some of that has kind of led me on to a further journey, which is more into the .NET MAUI space and trying to kind of not do the typical stuff. So I'm pushing on to more kind of a bit more fun and creative side, which is a bit of trying to build games in .NET MAUI.
Yeah, you're here to give us all, make us all jealous with all of your wonderful UI.
I don't know
You,
actually. I was fiddling last night and may have a few bugs, so we'll see how that
So
goes.
even though you just joined, you've been a part of the stream from the very get-go because people have been talking about you quite a bit. So first up is congratulations on your book. Do you have a link? Because we
Uh,
talked about your book a little bit, but if
oh,
you
thank
drop me
you.
a link in the private chat, I'll happily bring it up.
Yeah.
But Sean went through the life-changing journey, the mistake that you make once in your life about writing a book, an all-out book on .NET MAUI. I was telling Gerald that I wrote a book on Windows 8, which was obsolete before it even, like 3 months before it even came out. So that was fun. But you are in much better waters, and your book is getting some rave reviews from folks that we know. So good job on that. And
Thank you.
here's the link. So let me
So let's bring a link.
pull
You
that in.
you did warn me what I was getting myself into, and you were spot on.
It's a lot of work, but it's
It
it's
really
fun.
was.
It forces you to dive into things that you never cared about learning as much.
100%, yes. I've had a lot more focus on trying to teach people rather
Yeah.
than just do, which has been a very nice break outside of my comfort zone. Yes, I think that's one of the biggest takeaways. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Is some of the skills I've learned.
So you've written a book, and you're out of UK, and you also help out a lot on the community front with the toolkit. And every time you are speaking, every time you are making wonderful UI, you are moving the envelope, making us all sit up and do better. So, what have you been up to?
Uh, so um, I mean, actually, after the book, I had quite a quiet period because it
That's good. You need to
pushed,
recover.
yes, pushed me probably to not breaking point,
Yeah.
but then yes, I've recently got back into playing around with primarily .NET MAUI graphics, which is where I've well, okay, if we take a step back, prior to that, I started playing with Skier
Okay.
Sharp in Xamarin Forms days, and that was the trigger to realize actually what was possible in the mobile space. And then obviously with the evolution to .NET MAUI, the team have built .NET MAUI graphics, which has been fantastic. And it's a nice kind of, I know Lance mentioned it in the previous stream as to dealing with the kind of the platform differences or necessarily the kind of the idiom differences when you're talking between desktop and mobile. Thankfully, the .NET MAUI graphics is a way of almost avoiding the platform specific issues because it just gives you a canvas to draw on.
Yeah.
Of course, you're going to have sizing differences, but it really has done quite. It's been really quite impressive what could be achieved in
Right.
as fewer lines of code as possible because I guess it gives you a unified API in the same way that .NET MAUI gives you that unified API to the platform specific layers. It gives you a unified graphics API, so you define how you want to interact with it, and it will actually use the native controls down on the platforms themselves. So it uses the core graphics layer on iOS, so Android graphics on Android, and I get confused with the Windows one. It's Microsoft graphics or Windows graphics, depending on
Okay.
which platform. So it is really quite cool.
Yeah. So I'm guessing this is the GitHub repo that I'm pointing to. That's the home of Mavi Graphics. or are you talking about a different one? I think it's this one that you're talking about, right? Or maybe this is the one that Javier maintains.
That might be, yeah. It's actually on under the .NET MAUI repo.
Yeah.
It's
So, .NET MAUI's UI goal, I see your desktop, but if you take your, there you go. There, now we can see. The goal is, .NET MAUI's goal has been abstraction. So you write a piece of C# or XAML, and at runtime, it renders native UI. This is taking a different approach of painting more pixels and giving you more of a canvas so you can draw your own. But you're saying it does actually render some native UI.
no, sorry. So it's treating it more kind of like the Flutter space in a way, in the fact that
that's what I thought.
it's rendering on the screen. It's the point that I was trying to make is rather than it converting it to controls, it just uses the platform specific APIs
Right.
to do the drawing. So it's
Mhm.
not
Right.
it's not doing the rendering in the Maui land. It's
Right.
translating it across to
Yeah.
the platform specific APIs.
So a lot more control over the pixels, but you're missing out a little bit on the abstraction front with native UI, but you gain a lot more control over exactly what you want to draw.
Precisely that, yes. Yeah. You are constrained to the API that you get with .NET MAUI, but I certainly haven't found any limitations that have hindered me yet. And I know I forget the guy's name who introduced it now, because I originally was under the impression that .NET MAUI graphics was using Ski Sharp under the hood.
I think it is, or is it not?
It can, but it doesn't by default. It's actually
I see.
their own implementation, so they've got their own
Interesting.
graphics.
Is it Matlibu? Maybe pronouncing his name right, or not wrong.
Matt Leibowitz.
Yeah, Leibowitz. Yeah, very smart.
Yes, very clever guy. So he maintains the Ski Sharp stuff, and I think he
Yeah.
does work on this. But it's a name I hadn't heard of. He works for GitHub now.
I see.
John Lipsky. John Lipsky was the.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now this does give you the option of rendering things to a certain design system, like Fluent or Material. Is that correct?
I think you can potentially achieve that through. That's what Javier was doing on the repo that you shared.
Yeah. Okay.
Was it .NET?
Maui Graphics, I think is what it was called. Yeah, Microsoft Maui Graphics. Yeah, there's Matt. Yeah, so this one I think actually does offer you those design systems, so you can make things look like Fluent or Material if you wanted to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think this was their way of achieving, proving that it could be done, wasn't it? Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
All right, but you are using this, and you're building games. You've been building games with Xamarin, with Maui. Like, who does that? But you do amazing things.
Thank you. That's very kind. But I mean, the initial game that we built, it was fun and it looked pretty, but I didn't necessarily come up with the design, so I can't take credit for that. That was my buddy Joe. But it was more kind of, we found it fitted more of the kind of the typical business application architecture. We built it with MVVM.
Okay.
It was because it was a word search based app. So kind of the key interaction was the grid, selecting the tiles. So we'd use Skier for that. But the rest it was mostly just built as a typical business app, like I say. Following on from that, I've had some, I guess, more creative ideas, and I thought, well, maybe we'll try and see if we can take some of the learnings from that and push it into more, and I say the typical kind of game where you consider an engine, so where you'd have a polling loop. So you define how frequently you want to be called back, and then technically, so you'll say if you want to. I think the standard is about 16 milliseconds. So you'd end up sitting there constantly waiting and saying, well, what do I need to do now, rather than the business app where you're interrupt driven or event driven. So it's constantly on the go. It'd be more like a real-time system if anyone's worked with one of those.
Mm-hmm. So this app is still out in the app stores, and that was built with Xamarin, right?
Yes. So super word search, and actually, I've just been having a chat with my and Joe this week. We're talking about So we're trying to take it to another level, which will be fun. Don't like it.
Oh,
It's
nice.
not secure there.
Yeah.
So yes,
I
so this is the app
remember.
that we built. Yep.
Very cool. Yeah.
Thanks.
So now this is still a Xamarin app.
This is still. We got to the point of migrating it, and then I think the limitation was at the time there wasn't Lottie support, which is another fantastic library. If people aren't aware of that, being able to
Yeah, feel free to bring it up. Like you have a browser open. So this is it's an animations. What else does it do? Like I mostly know it as an animation library.
Yeah, I mean, I would consider it mostly just an animations library where you can. Oh, I tell you what, actually, where is it? It's an animations library, which that is a Lottie animation there.
Oh, I see. Nice.
And we use the same animation there as we do in the app. So it effectively, if you're creative and you can use Adobe, what's the tool now?
XD.
XD.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a plugin where body moving where you can export to a Lottie, and then essentially what it does is it generates a JSON file, and then plugins that will then convert that JSON file into the set of native animations and draw them. In a similar way, I think graphics could, in theory, probably achieve some of that because the Maui graphics, I mean, because now I know Lottie support is now officially available for Maui, has been for a while, and that is through the Skier Sharp library. So it's using some of the rendering graphics there.
Yeah. For people who are absolutely creatively challenged, like myself, like this stuff is so amazing that I can just bring it in
Yes.
and just light up.
And the fact that you can, there's a website called Lottie Files where you can search for some fancy loading screens. There's a good Twitter account, Lottie Files, as well, and I've seen that they've even announced of building games through Lottie Files.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Lance is doubling down, saying how amazing Lottie is. Yeah.
It really is.
All right. So you had that with Xamarin Forms and Lottie, and you. So I mean, now you have the ingredients to migrate that to Maui if you wanted to, because now you got official support.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, the only hurdle now is time, I think.
Yeah, which is the big hurdle in anything in life. Yeah.
Yeah. But it is something that we need to do. I think, like I say, is we've just been discussing some upcoming changes. So, given I think obviously Xamarin support's going in, did I see 8 months?
May, yeah.
Yeah.
Next year.
We probably should finish it up, finish that work off. Not that we've hit many issues, other than a couple of workarounds, but I suspect that it's either still a Maui or we can just remove them.
Yeah. Now you did tweet or post nowadays a screenshot that really enticed us about what you're about to go talk about. So is there a different game that you're writing?
I've recently been toying with the idea. So I gave a talk on this this engine that I've been building, and if I open the link, so it's here, it's on GitHub.
Okay, yeah, I can do that. I can just drop a link to your GitHub.
Thanks. With an idea of, like I say, is exploring how to do it, and actually then seeing how we could put it into Maui and make it usable for others. I'm still on the journey of understanding some of the complexities and trying to make it as usable as possible. So there's no NuGet packages at the moment because I don't want to risk breaking, but I'm certainly enjoying the journey.
So this is called Orbit?
Orbit, yes. So
Orbit,
that was the name of the first game that I wanted to build.
Okay.
Which is, you can see under here, there are a couple of games that I've been toying with, and README that shows off the game. That's the wrong README, isn't it? Orbit games, Orbit README, that one. Yes, and Matthew Leibowitz did build a Flappy Bird clone in Skier Sharp that helps to. So yeah, I'm trying to build a concept around a satellite, effectively having a ship orbit a planet and it has to defend it. So it's a kind of a
Ah,
crossover of asteroids and planetary defense with a few kind of
nice.
extra mechanics.
Nice.
So yeah, so that's what inspired the name of the engine, because I couldn't come up with anything better. Someone has actually suggested the name of Mage being multi-app game engine, which I thought could be quite cool.
There are two big problems in our industry. It's caching,
Naming.
validation, and naming things.
Yeah.
It's just always hard.
Yes. And sometimes off by one as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, sorry. So like I said, I've been on this journey of playing with this and getting distracted and think, oh, this other thing might be fun. So it's constantly evolving. But like I said, I gave a talk on this, and then I realized, why did I write the slides in Keynote? Why didn't I build them into the game itself, or work out how I could start? Because text-based games are can be really quite popular and fun. So why can't I make some of that stuff usable as well? So what I did was, I thought I'd just knock up a couple of slides for today.
All right.
Oh, there's a little bit of it in action. And then I started to try and add in the paddleboarding mechanic, but that didn't necessarily get complete. So I was tweaking last night and may have broken it. But what I've done here is, if we run it up. So this is the GIF
Look
that I
at
did.
that.
But the other thing that I've been toying with, because everyone likes to walk around on stage with a clicker, is I've got myself a PS4 DualShock controller, and that is my clicker.
Nice.
Yeah. So I've like I say, is I've quite often tried to avoid the platform specifics, but then I've now started to look at how I could interact with things like controller support, and that obviously pushes me back towards some platform specific layers. But I think what is probably a fairly common statement is, I'm mostly going to talk about the Apple integration today, and it just works. And it's really quite nice. I mean, sometimes the documentation is a journey in itself, just trying to find the information that you're looking for. But once you get it understood, it really does just work. So like I said, as I've got this DualShock connected up to my Mac via Bluetooth, but you can equally just buy a cheap gamepad. The quality's not great off Amazon, and plug it in, and that would work as well, if I did plug it in.
Okay, hold up for a second, because we have way too many questions. First is, Lance is asking, how did you create an 8-bit profile of yourself?
Yes, I was impressed at that. I just Googled
There's like a service?
image to pixel art, and yeah, I found a service I didn't mind, submitted my image to, that's already online, and it came back like that. And it's really quite cool. You could change the pixel size and all of that. I can find the link and I can share that.
Yeah, no rush, but that's good to know. We can Google, or some of us use Bing, so we might be a little challenged, but I'm getting by. So back on the first screen, like, is this is a Maui app, but is every pixel painted with Maui graphics, or is some parts of it done in Maui native?
So to try and be efficient, so this is part of the journey as well, is that I'm trying to learn in making sure that you get the right balance, because like I say, is in this polling loop, things get re-rendered every time, which so I'm trying to work out what the best level of efficiency is there. So on these two screens, this one and this one, what you'll see is the background image is actually Maui. It's Maui. So there's the image there, and then the rest, everything else is rendered directly.
I see. Okay.
So
all right.
So we've got this, yeah, and I thought I could make it really quite cute by then saying, well, I've obviously when we speak, we like to introduce ourselves, so why not have a character selection screen, so we could even jump between it, but
cool.
It shows off who I am and what I get, what I'm not very good at.
Okay, so the next question. You essentially just have a grid with background, and then the rest of it is the engine.
Yes.
Tell us what's your story of plugging in the game controller? How are you doing that?
The physical controller.
Yeah, the physical controller.
Yep. So, and this is, I think, actually where Maui excels. Well, I mean, I can't necessarily compare it to many other multi-platform frameworks, but certainly excels from the Xamarin days in the fact that obviously we've got the single project architecture, which means it's much nicer to have your files close together, and some of the kind of the nice newer pieces of C# functionality. So I've got myself a partial class that defines not a lot, in fact. And that's because I've been lazy and I haven't added the platform, the Android or the Windows. So
Yeah,
to get it to
sure.
compile, I've just got a hash if when I'm using it. So I've created a class, and then I've decided, rather than looking down at the platform, each of these buttons on the controller, because obviously there's a hell of a lot more on this than there is on this one. I want to make sure that I just map across to the inputs that I really care about. So I've got a set of buttons down here that I'm treating as my input, and the ones that I care about. So we've got an accept, which is my X button, or my B button on the cheaper controller. Then we've got the ability to navigate back and forwards, so that's between slides. And then we've got the typical direction, so that's the up, down, left, right, and the left joystick, thumbstick. So we've got our option of buttons, and then in Mac Catalyst, sometimes it doesn't have a happy day, does it? Visual Studio for Mac. Okay. So to get it working, like I said, it's really fairly simple. What we do, so when we initialize, we kick off what's known as called. So we try to discover what controllers are connected, and actually that carries on for the life of the app. So even if you start the app and then you connect your controller, it'll pop up. You'll get a callback. That works. On iOS, I believe you have to add in some entitlements or onto info p list, which is documented to say that you want to interact with that. Typically, because these are the extra capabilities. Then yes, so like I said, so we get a callback whenever a controller connects. You can also have this concept of there's a couple of ones. There is a did become current as well. I haven't done that because I've been jumping between the controllers, so I have multiple on. Knowing which one's current is a little challenging at times.
So some of this is built into Maui, or are you having to write all of this yourself?
I've written this myself. This
Okay.
is using, so Game Controller is
I see.
the Apple's framework. But like I say, is when we subscribe to the events of receiving a connection, we then start the discovery, and then that's it. Once we've discovered, we then there's a vast amount of profiles that come with supplied by Apple. You get there's the DualShock side, there's the Xbox controllers, there's the kind of any cheap USB ones. You've then also got joysticks. The support out there is really quite vast.
Interesting.
And
So you have a, I'm sorry, I was going to say, like, you have a lot of control over exactly choosing which inputs you want, but again, the downside is you do have to write this for every platform and just trust their mappings.
yes, you do, sadly. And that's part of the journey which I'm going to be on in the next, I guess, another period of time is to work out exactly what information would then potentially provide as a kind of a common set of functionality. Because if you imagine in this app at least, I only actually care whether the button's pressed, and even the same with the directional buttons. So actually you'll see here, so you've got there's button input, which is typically your shoulder buttons, and X, circle, square, triangle. And then you've got directional buttons, which are your thumbsticks, I forget how the little bar on the middle, the touchpad works. It does map to it. I just can't remember. There might be a separate input for that. But what these do is these come back as numerical values. The directional buttons are just 0 or 1, but the stick, because you can move it, it gives you a value between 0 and 1. So actually you could say, well, if you've only slightly pushed it forward, then you actually move your character slower than if you had pushed it down fully. So like I say, I've mapped them across this way, and then I'm relying on the game engine to say, well, I'll then control the input and react to it accordingly based on some other bits of information. So if I just quickly jump across, I see we haven't got a lot of time, so I'm just going to jump through all of that.
No, it's okay. You can slow down a little bit. I think we can. Oh, look at that! This is.
So we've got a little paddle border. There's only one log because I didn't have a lot of time.
Oh, you did that for our paddleboarding stream.
Yeah. So and then
this is amazing.
It's helpful for me to try and learn about, because there's obviously so many different scenarios that you could consider with a controller, in the fact that you might just want to jump between a section, like a kind of a temple run style game. So you just tap the directional button once, and it'll move you up and down. But then there's obviously the concept of, if you hold it, you don't want to like move too far. So it's a case of a single press. So we are throttling or dampening that. And then if I can get the river working, yep. And then you've got this concept of, if you use the stick, you can actually control exactly where you are on the river, which feels a little bit more real. You'll have to forgive my my shoddy little surfer.
This is amazing. Like, here we are building enterprise, forms over data apps, and you are putting paddle boards in the river. This is amazing. It makes us so jealous of your skills of knowing exactly how to draw.
But like I say, if we look, I know there's not a lot of time, but we look at, so that's the free border. So I've created these base classes that allow you to handle the rendering, and that comes with the engine. So there's the engine here, and these are all the classes that I would expect to ship as a NuGet package eventually if we get there. So essentially what you do is you get a load of objects that you want to add to your scene. So this is our scene. This is the one where you could move around freely. You can choose how you render things. So we've got the kind of like the green background, and then we're rendering the image. So that's the river moving, the flowing. It's a little bit of a cheat. We've just got 2 images, and we're just doing it, and then we're just kind of jumping on back to the back each time. And again, trying to use a little bit of efficiency in the fact that if it doesn't need to be rendered, we're not going to, because what's the point?
How do you do that? Like, when one canvas runs out, how do you preload the next one? So it looks like it's continuous flowing.
So essentially, it's actually just controlled with an X coordinate. So that in this kind of game loop approach, what we do is, if you think of a cycle, every 16 milliseconds, what's going to happen is there's going to be a callback to say, well, go and update your state. Make sure you know what your new state is given a period of time that's elapsed. And then once that has happened, we then translate that information into something that's rendered on screen. So you update the state, you render, and then you kind of go around the loop again. And the one that I missed out initially is you process user input, which is our keyboard. Sorry, our keyboard, our controller here. So I say it that there really isn't too much to it. I think the complexity is going to come in terms of efficiency, which is the hurdle that I'm trying to hit as hard as I can, because you can quite easily cause issues. And actually, when you asked me about how much of it was rendered, if I rendered that image through the graphics, that big background, things did slow down a bit. So it is going to be a balancing act in making sure you can achieve exactly what you want.
Wow, I have so many questions about this. And chat room is here. Yes, Carl. Hey, you made it in here to say hi to Shaun.
Hey, Carl.
Yep. I do see our next guest in the back room here, but Leo Marcy, if I can speak to you, if I can just take like 10 more minutes here, or maybe 5 more minutes, because I have so many questions here for Shaun here about what he's doing. And then me and Leo Morris are the last ones to close out the stream, so we have a little time on our hand. But it's just like here we are building boring apps, and you just like wake up and you decide to build a game engine altogether. The refresh count, like how do you control how often that update gets called?
Yep. Okay. So that comes. So like I say, sorry, it's a little tricky. As we've so like I say, this is the library project that I'm building. So there is something that manages the scenes in a game, and essentially what we do when we come down to updating it, we work out what the current point in time is, how long has changed since we last updated, and then we tell the scene to update itself with that duration. So the aim there is to try and create as much of a smooth frame rate as possible, because if you think like when you're updating your state and if your character's running, you want to make sure that their movement is still smooth by saying, well, if one frame the first callback took 20 milliseconds, but the next one took 100 milliseconds. I know that's a bit extreme. You don't want the character to be here and then jump across to here. You want to make sure it still looks like it's smooth.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to do that, you actually then say, well, here's how long it took. You can then use that to apply a weighting to kind of the movement or any of updating the state to then say, hopefully then you give a much smoother frame rate.
Yeah, so chat room is getting to the exact question I was going to ask. Refresh rate. Carl and Lance are both asking, how do you do this with the max refresh rate? How do you know one update didn't take longer than what you anticipated before the second one kicks in? Like, how do you control this?
So we know. I haven't tested this to the extreme, so we might have to kind of actually do a better job here. But we try to make sure that it's this delay, isn't it? Which means we work out how long we've taken versus how long we should have taken, and then we take that between the minimum between how long to the next frame and how long we should be until the next frame, if that makes sense. So if there's only 10 milliseconds left and but the expectation is 16 milliseconds, we'll only do it in 10 milliseconds time.
Yeah,
I haven't got to the point of it being negative.
Yeah, there's so much to this. Yeah,
and there is. Yeah, this is the level that I think I'm hopeful that I'm not going to be able to push it that hard, but there is going to have to be a case of maybe we end up dropping and then we call back in the next frame, if that makes sense. Because, like you say, you can't be taking longer than your callback,
right.
your refresh rate. Otherwise, you're just going to go into a hold.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, game engines are fascinating. Right, and here's Shaun building one from scratch, because why not?
It's the journey that I'm on. It's not the destination. Is what I tell myself.
Yeah, Flashover was asking about benchmarking. Yeah, so I mean, do you think .NET MAUI native will be able to pull off what you're doing, or you are able to get down to a much lower level with graphics?
I don't know. I mean, part of what excited me was I read a blog post a couple of, I don't actually know, probably longer than months ago now, which was discussing kind of how you can actually sometimes break out of sometimes the performance hit you get, especially like with Android when you're dealing with some of the native controls coming from there, by rendering directly onto the screen through some of these APIs. So I don't know, because obviously we are still delegating down, or .NET MAUI is delegating down to the the native layer, the platform specific layers. So there will be some overheads there, but I think another when I get to the levels of benchmarking, I also want to be able to benchmark between the .NET MAUI graphics and Skia, because, like I say, you can load in the Skia backend, which we do here. If I can remember where. Is it in a mock? Somewhere it does render. It's not there. It's not would be in the dispatcher. Oh no, it's on a different branch. That's what it is. Yeah, so because I was also exploring this concept of being able to use like a snapshot testing. So if you want to verify that the sequences of frames match what's expected for, say, like a tutorial screen that should never change, then rather than having to kind of write lots of asserts, we could possibly consider rendering that out as an image and then verifying that matches each test run.
Yeah. What Carl is asking, I think this has more to do with maybe .NET MAUI native than what you're doing, but like AOT compilation, like that's a done thing for .NET MAUI on iOS, Android, everywhere. So when you're rendering native UI, you can expect solid performance. But what Shaun is doing here is building a scene and refreshing that scene in a game loop. That's a whole other ball game altogether. Yeah.
Maybe I should have just stuck with the.
No, you're pushing the barriers forward.
It is really good fun. That's what I keep telling myself anyway.
Yeah. All right, so this is amazing already, and we so for context, people might not remember this. Last year or the year before, we did a long stream about snorkeling in Maui, and Shaun showed up with snorkeling gear borrowed from his kids. But this time around, he actually built a paddleboard game, as one does on a paddleboarding in Maui stream. So we
I
love
couldn't
you
think
for
of
all
how
of
to
that.
dress up as a paddleboarder. Sorry.
This is amazing. So the game engine, this is this is in the works. Do you plan to keep working on it, or what's next for it?
Yes, certainly. So I have a bit of an end goal. I've had this idea for a game that I've wanted to achieve for a good number of years. Now, it probably would have made more sense to just learn how to use Unity again and actually do it through that mechanism. But I've seen it as a bit of a fun kind of push myself to learn some of the more kind of fundamentals underneath, and then still try to get to the point of being able to achieve that end goal of that building that game.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah,
and then
I
you
see
have
it.
your good.
Sorry.
I was going to say, like, you also have your other Ward game to port over to Maui whenever you folks have time, and then pushing this game engine out sometime for maybe others to use.
Yes. So I'd love to have conversations, discussions around what might work for other people, and tell me how I might have messed up on terms of like managing frame rates and things. That's perfect.
No, this is
but
all
no,
great.
it's all good. It's I would love for people to use it. That's why it is out in the open, and to be involved in any discussions or development.
Yeah, but we had Dan Siegel on, so him and me talked about how open source is. Like, don't burn yourself up. Like, you're doing this on your free time. As more and more people start using it, you're going to have more demands on it. So it's a balancing act.
It is, and I think I've learned that the hard way. Not thankfully not too hard, but I've been thinking on a good talk of how you could discuss how that you could take it too far. Yeah.
All right, Shaun, this is amazing. I'm
Thank you
going
so
to
much.
bring your desktop down, and I'm going to take screenshots of your game and promote what you just built for just one stream, because you built a whole game, a paddleboarding game. That's amazing.
Thank you.
All right, Shaun. We love you for what you do. Congratulations on the book. A lot of people have
Thank you.
commented about how much they're learning, and I know how much work it is. We also talked about Matt Goldman, who also wrote another book on .NET MAUI. We were initially going to have him here, but his family is in the UK, and they were having some health things. But good to see folks just step up and write books on .NET MAUI and get everyone excited. We started with Maddie, and the overall vibe and the community agreement is it's high time where .NET MAUI we are seeing so many success stories from enterprises, from indie devs, that the maturity is here and tooling is stable, so it's only the sky is the limit from here.
Yeah, totally. And I think I didn't realize up until like the last few years. I did enterprise work, but actually the power that came with Xamarin Forms and now .NET MAUI as an indie developer, I think is really, really impressive.
Yeah, indeed. All right, Shaun, I know it's late for you. Like Gerald, you may have also skipped out on dinner or family time with you folks.
I'm in a hotel room. We're actually
Oh,
we've
you're traveling.
just got away. Yes. So
Okay. All right. Good.
I am
Good.
going to go meet them in the bar now. So
There you go. So have a drink on us. And thanks for showing up here. Thanks for doing all the things. We love you.
thank you so much for having me, Sam.
All right. So we are taking Shaun away and bringing up our next guest. If you're ready, viewers. Yes. Okay.
How are you?
Hey, there you are.